Hello again and welcome to The Luxury of Choice, a B2B technical sales and business podcast brought to you by the training team of George James Limited. My name is Steve Vaughan. I'm a senior sales trainer at George James, as well as the host and producer of this podcast. This is another of our mid-month interview shows when I interview a subject matter expert on a topic that we think you, the listener, will find of interest and value. Today my guest is Joe Keeler. Joe Keeler is the Managing Director of Belbin Limited. During a 23-year tenure at Belbin, Joe has been responsible for spearheading strategic and operational activities and building the Belbin brand, both in the UK and worldwide. In addition to liaising with global Belbin partners, Joe leads the UK team and works closely with Dr. Meredith Belbin to ensure that innovation is always in line with the company ethos. Hi Joe, thank you for being here today. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much, Steve, for inviting me. It's lovely to be here.
It's great to have you here. Now, I've got a bit of a tickly cough, I'm afraid, as you might slightly hear in the background. So I'm just getting over a cold that my grandson managed to pass on to me. So bear with me. I might have to just occasionally hit the mute button if I'm going to cough, but hopefully we'll manage to get through that today. So I think we know each other through my colleague Prue, who I think you've known for a while now. And I think Prue's a licensed or qualified Belbin practitioner, yeah?
Yes, she's an accredited Belbin.
Is that the right phrase?
Yes, you get the right phrase.
Yeah, thank you.
Accredited.
Thank you for putting me that right. So we'll get into all this over the next half hour or so. First of all, could you tell the listener a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background and how you got into the role that you have now?
Absolutely. I'll try and keep it short. So I'm in the field of helping teams work better together. That's what we do at Belbin, but that's not really where I started, as most people have these wiggly careers, or whatever you call the squiggly careers nowadays. So I have got a chemistry degree, chemistry, environmental science, and I started off in the pharmaceutical industry. So I was a sales rep back in the 90s for two pharmaceutical industries. Okay. In my car, going to surgeries and hospitals, selling various legal medicines, obviously. And then after 6 years in a sales role, I decided that I wanted to do something a bit different. I didn't want to go to the head office, which was the only option for me if I stayed with the pharmaceutical companies I was working. I quite like Cambridge. Sure. And I saw this lovely little advert for marketing coordinator for this company called Belbin. And I had no idea really what that entailed, but I'd already been Belbined on a training course.
Okay.
So I kind of heard the name. I thought, that's a brand I recognise. Sure. So I went along and I started in a marketing coordinator capacity. I think I was employee number 4.
Wow. And
spent the first 6 months wondering what on earth I'd done. So going from a massive corporate, employee number, goodness, how many thousand, to suddenly being one right at the very not the beginning, but, quite early on. Sure. And from marketing coordinator, then my role has grown and it's gone more from marketing into a management capacity over the years. And then 18 months ago, Dr. Meredith Belbin and Nigel Belbin, his son, decided that they wanted to sell the company, but they wanted to sell it to us.
Wow.
So we're now an employee ownership trust.
Wow.
So
fantastic.
The company, we're a team company and it's owned by the team, which is a fabulous place to be.
Absolutely.
A bit more hard work, let's be honest. And not quite as easy as I thought it would be. Sure. But yeah, so gone from chemistry, sales, marketing, management. There you go.
Fantastic. What a journey that is. And, I've done the big corporate thing as well, and I've worked for small companies. There's pros and cons for both, but that's quite a journey you've been through. So I think we should get into the obvious question you need to ask now before we go any further. Now, I've been Belbin, for want of a better phrase, but for people who don't know what Belbin is, can you just go right back to what the concept is and then why it's of interest to anybody listening to the podcast today?
Absolutely, and I'll try and keep this brief because this is my specialist subject.
Make it as long as you need to, because I think
what it's like.
This is crucial. I think for the podcast, people really understand, because I'm a paid up fan. I think it's a fantastic process, but obviously people need to know a bit more about it first.
Absolutely. So. Well, it's almost in two parts. So Belbin Team Roles, in the first instance, is a theory. And the theory came about because back in the 1960s, there used to be a management course at Henley Management School where all these really, very able managers, you'd go on a course. It was like just before an MBA sort of came on. These are ones who were earmarked for the higher echelons of management. And they had to work as syndicates. They were working together. And Henley couldn't quite work out that these really great performing managers, sometimes when they worked in syndicates, they were working brilliantly, and sometimes less so.
Okay.
And they couldn't work out why some teams succeeded and some teams failed. So they got the academics in. They got the Cambridge Industrial Training Research Unit to come along, and that's where Dr. Meredith Belbin comes in, and his wife, actually, who ran it. She was the boss. And they went and spent 9 years trying to work out why some of these teams worked brilliantly and why some didn't.
9 years, wow. Okay.
9 years, going up, from Cambridge to Henley, studied over 200 teams, well over 200 teams. And they came up with different hypotheses. So you're thinking, well, I know what a good team is. It's all the bright people. So they put everybody with high IQ together. And I always say, luckily for us mere mortals, not only did those teams not do particularly well, they did really quite badly. So they realised that intellect wasn't a measure of team success.
Interesting.
So they then went to personalities and said, right, OK, let's put everybody who's similar personalities together.
Okay.
And let's see if that's what makes a team. And again, it wasn't. They were all okay, but they weren't brilliant. And then over a period of time, they had so much data. They used an analysis called Bayes' analysis, which is where you observe what's going on every 30 seconds.
Wow.
So they're given the simulation, and then they had to say, right, every 30 seconds what's going on. And had all these wonderful anthropologists and psychologists and everything on the team. But anyway, over a period of time, they came to realise that the most successful teams, and they could measure this because they put this one-day thing together called Teamopoly, and there was an outcome. So they could measure how well the teams were doing. There's a financial outcome. And they realised that the key element was diversity.
Right.
So the most successful teams were those ones which had a whole diverse range of behaviours. They then realised that obviously the behaviours that we bring to a team are infinite.
Okay.
But they found 9 distinct clusters of behaviour were actually crucial for that team's performance.
And just from a point of clarification, is this the behaviour they have within the team as opposed to their personality as such? It's the behaviour they have in the team.
Yes. So let's just stop there a sec. That's really, really important. So your personality is who you are. That's you. That's deep down.
Yes.
That's what makes you tick. Your behaviour is what you do. It's how it manifests itself.
Okay.
So the way you behave may change depending on the person you're dealing with. It may change with the team that you're in, and that's okay because it's a verb. It's not a noun.
Right.
So your personality is more of a noun.
Okay.
Belbin is an ing word for going back to those primary school days. That's what they found, that you had these clusters of these behaviours, which are things that people could observe and see, and they could almost touch.
Right.
And they found 9 clusters, and each of these clusters was called a team role.
Right.
So we have 9 Belbin team roles, 9 distinct clusters of behaviour.
Within the team. Yeah, okay.
Within the team.
Wow.
You don't need all of them all of the time.
No.
You just need to know where they are. And some of us can play 3, 4, 5 of those roles really, really well. We're not one-trick ponies. We're not just contributing in one way. We're complex human beings. And the idea is to understand what role does the team need you to play at that time for the team to be successful. So it starts with the needs of the team. So if you were looking for some problem solving,
okay,
let's say that you had something came up and you thought, I don't know how to get around this. You'd say, right, what behaviours we need at the moment are what we call the plant.
Yeah.
And the resource investigator.
Right.
Because both of those behaviours are about ideas.
That's me, by the way.
Either original ideas, yeah, me too. Either original ideas or ideas borrowed from elsewhere.
Okay.
The people who can bring in ideas from outside of the organisation.
Love it.
So they'd be brilliant at that. But do you know, those behaviours are not needed at the end. You know, when you're checking and double, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and all that. You really don't need those behaviours. At that point, you need the behaviours of a completer finisher and the implementers.
My wife would tell you that's why our house is half painted.
Did you get bored halfway through?
I do. That's exactly it, yeah.
I feel I know you so well, and we've hardly ever spoken to Steve. And this is it. It gives you that wonderful language of understanding which behaviours are needed. But we know that we need 9.
Fascinating. Now, I think some of these behaviours, I think people use them in day-to-day communication without knowing where they come from. So I've often heard people say, well, I'm not a completer finisher, but probably don't know where it comes from. Yeah, fascinating.
That's Belbin.
And I I'm a big sports fan. I'm a big football fan for my sins. And I can think back through the times when there's been great teams of great players, highly skillful players and highly, great dribblers of the ball, very skillful players. But the team has failed because they've got no clogging defenders or grafting midfielders. And it's the same kind of thing, isn't it, really?
Oh, absolutely. I'm an Ipswich supporter.
Oh, right.
Does that mean I like football? I'm not entirely sure. I'd like to think that I do.
Conversation, I think, for another day.
Isn't it? That's another podcast. But if you think about it from a football analogy, what you don't want is 11 people who are all brilliant goalkeepers.
No, of course not. No.
What you're looking for is somebody who's brilliant in each of the roles that they need to fulfill. But there's some flexibility, aren't they? Some of the best teams are the ones that understand that if something's not quite working, they've got that flexibility to go in as well.
Absolutely.
Somebody you have to play on the left wing sometimes, and the team understands that that's what the team needs them to do. It's not about them always doing what they prefer to do. Yeah.
So it really came out in the UK. I didn't realise that. I just kind of assumed it was an American thing, but it was...
No, it's very, very, very UK.
Fantastic.
So all the work was carried out at Henley Business School.
Wow.
Now it's Henley Management College. Or the other way around, sorry. They then took all of the research. They said, well, this is really good, but, they kind of outstayed their welcome 9 years at Henley. So they carried out the same research in Australia, and they found exactly the same thing. So it was these distinct clusters of behaviour. So then what the whole team said, well, this is brilliant. Let's go use it. We've got this theory. It's better to check that it works in action. And they started working with Cadbury, Schweppes, ICI, very much on a recruitment piece to start with. And they found actually they needed some nuances. They had to change it a little bit.
Right.
It was all very much informed by real life. This wasn't just a theory plucked out of the air. It was something that kept going back into the industry and checking each time. And then they thought, right, we'll use it. So there's Dr. Meredith Belbin. He's 98 in June.
Wow.
And he's still writing books and stuff. He is incredible. But he used to write these reports out longhand about people's preferences and, where people were. And then suddenly his son, who was more the entrepreneur, Nigel, said, hang on a minute. It's 1987. There's things called computers out now.
Absolutely.
Let's see if we can program this so we don't have to write all these reports longhand. So that's where it becomes from a theory into a tool.
Right, got you.
Where people can complete questionnaires online and they find out what their preferences are when it comes to these 9 different team role behaviours.
So it's not a case of you recognising that there's a gap in the team and you trying to be almost like a chameleon and changing you. It's recognising what the team needs or is missing perhaps and adding that skill set, for want of a better word, to the team to make it complete, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. But I think sometimes, especially with us managers, is we think we should be able to do everything. And we feel that if there is a gap, we think, well, we can do that. And if you think of us as an elastic band, we can stretch so many times and come back to the same place if we're stretching our strengths, so to speak. We're trying to cover everything. Sure. But sometimes we don't come back to the place where we started. And sometimes we stretch so much we ping off, and that's where burnout happens.
Yeah, been there.
And that's when we start looking for another job. So it's recognising the fact that, I can do it, but the question is, should I do it? Or is there somebody else within the team who can play that role better? And perhaps next time you're having a recruitment or something along there, is there somebody who could fill that gap?
Fascinating. I think it's probably ICI where I first came across Belbin, because I was a chemist at ICI a long time ago, so it would have been around that time it was coming in probably. This would have been late 80s. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You were probably one of the first.
Wow.
There you go.
Do I get a badge of honour for that or anything?
No, absolutely, you do, and a certificate.
So, fantastic theory, and totally get the different behavioural styles within a team. But let's put this into practice. So if I'm a sales manager listening to the podcast right now and I'm thinking, well, looking at my team right now, I may have some gaps there. How do we put this into practice? How do we use it in a business scenario?
The first thing I would say is be realistic.
Right. I
think that is the first thing. So there's lots of theories out there. There's so many theories that we can quote, but how many can we kind of use. So make it realistic. If I'm remembering back to my sales manager, and when I was in part of the sales team, I think my sales manager actually wanted us all to be identical.
Wow.
I think he would have found life really easy if we all had exactly the same skill set and we had exactly the same ways of working, because that would have made his life a lot easier when it came to managing us and also predicting outcome. But if you think around your sales team, do you really know the strengths of everybody? Do you know where to place them when you're working together?
Right.
And also, as the manager, are you getting the most out of your team? Because what you need to do is say, well, actually, everybody's different. Everybody's got different strengths. How can I manage them according to the strengths that they have?
Okay.
I'll give you an example. If somebody is really high shaper, for example, and that means that they need to get stuff done now, they're competitive, challenging, high energy, it's going towards the goal, and yet they're managing somebody who perhaps is really high monitor evaluator.
Okay.
And they're the ones that take the emotion out of the decision-making process, and they weigh up the pros and the cons, and they're always right. They like to weigh things up. Well, what would happen is the shaper boss might say, I need it now, I need it now, I need it now. And the monitor evaluators go, I need more time. I need more time. Do you want the correct answer or do you want a quick answer? And that's where there's lots of friction starts happening.
Fascinating.
But as a manager, if you knew that, you go, okay, John over here is a high monitor evaluator. I'm going to give him all the data he needs 2 weeks before the meeting.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
That will give him time to go through everything, weigh everything up, and then we'll be able to work together to get to that outcome that we need. But I've given time because I know I need him to play to his strengths. He is right. It does need to be the right decision. So it's understanding from a management point of view how to get the most out of everybody within the team.
Right.
But then it's to check that you don't just have all of the same. So although my manager, I think, would have preferred us to all be very, very similar so he could manage us in the same way, is saying, well, hang on a minute. Are we always missing this because we haven't got this particular contribution? Are we always messing up at the final hurdle because we don't have complete a finisher? Who can be developed into that role? Because we can change. Our behaviours can change.
Okay.
It could be that somebody doesn't realise they're brilliant at something yet. Or when it comes to recruitment, can we bring somebody in there?
Good point.
So find out what the team needs. What does the team need right now?
So it's a useful
Work
recruitment
out those
tool as well in that
behaviours.
case as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And would you, in that case, then would it be used as part of an interview process in that case?
Some people do.
Right.
Just a caveat there, obviously, recruitment, what you're trying to do is build up the best picture you can of an individual.
Of course,
and you should never rely on one tool.
No, absolutely.
Never rely on one tool. Belbin helps to add a little bit of colour to the painting that you're trying to create of that individual you're recruiting. Right. But people do use it at interview. There's a chap in the States, he's got a startup now, it's quite a large startup in the US, and he uses Belbin every time to build his teams.
Fascinating.
Because people, we're salespeople. You're talking to salespeople. Salespeople are brilliant at selling themselves.
You'd be surprised
sometimes.
Let's
be honest. Well, yeah, maybe. And what Belbin just does is gives you a bit of a reality check.
Sure.
If somebody's filled in a questionnaire first and you say, well, actually, can you give me an example of this? And then you get to find out the real them.
Exactly.
So it's quite a handy tool. Yeah.
Just to recap, Joe, I think there's been some fantastic points that have come out of that last little bit, really. So just thinking about my sales management career and the team that I've had, I used to say, I've got a couple of top performers, guys that are always going to be 120% of target, but I don't want a team of them because they're going to be super hard work to manage because they're always needy and ready, wanting stuff. You want a couple of guys who, and I use the phrase generally, who will just do the job and hit the numbers without a lot of hands-on. And I also need people that I'm bringing through. So that kind of makes sense from that perspective. And I know people can go and look up on your website the different profiles, but just in a very quick summary, what are the 9 different profiles?
Okay, the 9 team roles. Let's break them down into 3s. Yeah. It's easier, isn't it? So we've got 3 team roles, which are all to do with people.
Okay.
We've got the Resource Investigator, who just knows everybody, enthusiastic, opportunistic, got a great little black book, and is always looking for that opportunity. Yep. Then we have the Team Worker, is one that cares, great empathy, listening skills. It's the gel that keeps the team together. It's the one that you want with your trickiest of customers, by the way.
Yeah.
They bring their energy levels down. They're able to see things from other people's point of view. And then you have the Coordinator, is the one like the conductor. They know what the music's meant to sound like, and they delegate brilliantly to make sure that happens. So they're quite mature, quite laid back. Okay. So you have 3 social roles. You then have 3 action roles who get stuff done. So we have the Shaper, is the one that knows what the objective is and is going to get there quickly. There's going to be no obstacle in their way. They're going to be high energy, and they're just going to be able to get the whole team across the finishing line.
Right.
Then there's the implementer, and implementers have, I always say, a slight fetish for Excel, Gantt charts. They're the ones who like the stationery cupboard, different they're organisers.
Definitely not me.
They are efficient. Me neither. They're efficient. They're practical. They've got a spreadsheet for everything. They've got process, and they're very loyal. So you have your implementer, and then you have the completer finisher we've spoken about before, the detailed one, the one that makes sure that there are no mistakes. So they're action roles. And then we have 3 thinking roles, and those 3 thinking roles are plant. We said before, the problem solvers, coming up with unique suggestions to problems. You have the monetary evaluators, the ones that are weighing up the pros and cons to make sure that the right decision is made. And then the specialist, which is the one that takes a deep dive into a particular subject area. They've got a passion for learning. They have a love of knowledge. So they're all the 9. So we've got 3 social, 3 thinking, 3 action roles. And we could all have a combination. We could have one of each in our preferred roles. We may find ourselves ending towards just social roles. We're complex people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're not going to say you're one thing. So my top team roles are shaper, coordinator, resource investigator. A whirlwind of energy, and you're probably coming across, I talk too quickly, and I also have quite a big sort of broad overview, sort of strategic overview as well.
Yeah. That comes across loud and clear.
I don't know if that's a good thing. I need to work with some people who are high completer finisher implementers.
Fascinating.
They're the ones that complement me. Yeah.
I should have looked at mine before, because I did mine when I joined George James, so it's about 5 years old now, but I would imagine mine's very similar in that respect. Really.
I'm sensing this too, yeah.
So you can certainly find out more on the website, which we'll link to at the end of the show, and obviously the process about how you can go through and find out what your let me get the phrase right. Team role, is that the right phrase?
Your team role preferences.
Team role preferences. Okay.
Yeah.
So is there such a thing as a good or a bad team role preference, or is it just the way you are?
Absolutely not.
Right.
Every contribution is welcome. What we find within organisations is sometimes to do with the culture of the organisation. They may value some team role behaviours more than others. Which is a real shame, because then you lack that diversity that you need within. But no, absolutely, there is the wrong team role being played at the wrong time.
Right. Okay.
But it doesn't mean that it's the role. There's no good or bad. Okay. Sometimes you can think about it as a stage, and everybody's got the script, and you've got to make sure the right actors are going in at the right time, and the rest of us are in the wings. You don't want the wrong person saying the wrong lines in the wrong act, for example.
Yeah, fascinating. I've often said, actually, when you're in sales, you almost adopt a persona like you're in a play almost. I've done a little bit of stage work in my time. So totally get that. So if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm a solo contributor right now, for whatever reason, I'm either a manager without a team, or I'm a salesperson at this stage, I haven't got to a managerial career. Is Belbin relevant for me still? Is it useful for me?
Absolutely. Of course I'm going to say that. But of course I am. Why am I saying that? Is because what Belbin does, it gives you an idea of how you behave. Okay. It gives you an idea of... It's all about self-awareness, actually. The figures show that only about 15% of us are truly self-aware. We know our impact on others. And it's difficult. You don't just suddenly become self-aware overnight because you decide to be so. No. It's something we need to work on. And one of the key things with Belbin is what you say, you fill in a questionnaire that you find out where you think your preferences are. But then we ask you to send a questionnaire. It's just a list of words that people tick to people that have worked with you. Okay. So not people you know down the pub. No, but you're not friends, not family, definitely not family. People that have worked with you in some capacity. And what they're feeding back to you is, yes, you think you may behave in this way. This is the way it's coming across.
Interesting.
And for a self-awareness point of view, this is critical. So maybe you think you're a really high shaper, and they may say, yes, you are, but some of the words we're ticking are saying you're a bit too challenging sometimes. So it's useful for me to know, as a solo person, if I'm in front of a customer, a client, a stakeholder, I may not be part of a team, but it's really useful to know how I am coming across to others and getting that feedback. Because you can't feedback on somebody's personality, because that's deep down inside you. You can't say, well, actually, I don't think you're much of an extrovert, really, or how sensing are you? But you can feedback on your behaviours.
And I think that's a really important point, and we were talking about this before we started recording, and the difference between Belbin and things like Myers-Briggs or DISC profiles and things like that, or I've done one based on colours in the past as well, and those are kind of behavioural. If I've got this right, they're more like personality type things.
Yes,
and you're much more behavioural.
Absolutely. Okay. If you think about it like a ship on the ocean, let's have lots of analogies here. Sure. I can't think of a football one. So down at, your anchor is your DNA. Okay. That's fixed. Yeah. Nobody can see it, but it's there. Then halfway up the anchor chain is where your personality is. It can change a little bit. It's not going to change massively, but people can't necessarily see it. The behaviour is the ship. You can see how it changes when there's a storm or anything, and it's something that's very visible to people. So your DISC and other ones and MBTI, they're lower down, which aren't necessarily visible. They're a measure of who you are.
So
they're not a measure of what you do.
And I'm just thinking how, through my own corporate career as well, about things that I've done. So, when I was a senior manager at Thermo Fisher, I did a 360 feedback, which was quite an eye-opener, because as you say, people aren't aware of how they behave, really. So I can see how these things all dovetail together, really, as tools. It's not just one of these things. It's really understanding what you're trying to achieve, really.
Yes, it is. And I think that's the key thing when anybody's looking at any sort of self-improvement, be it as a manager, as a team. It's what is it that you're looking to achieve? There's so many things out there. It's making sure you choose the right one for what you want the outcomes to be.
Do you see a role for Belbin in sales? I mean, obviously we're all in sales on this, you and I, and people listen to this, but can you see a role for it being used actually as part of a sales strategy or even planning how to win business at a particular account?
That's really interesting, actually. It is used within sales.
Okay.
We have worked with Cranfield University over a period of years, and we work a lot with Professor Javier Marcos, who is strategic selling at Cranfield. And he uses the Belbin model when he's talking to people about forming alliances in key account management.
Wow.
So not just your team, but if you are working closely with stakeholders, if you've got lots of negotiations, especially if they're high risk, and it's not about one-to-one negotiation, it is more about a team negotiation. Yes. Is if you understand the Belbin team roles of your own team and the team that you're working with, you can ensure that those negotiations and that communication is far more effective, understanding what everybody's bringing in, because you can also pair complementary people up.
Sure.
Sometimes it could be, say you're pairing up two people who are really high shape, but they can get quite competitive.
I bet.
They can get sparks will fly, and that's no good for anybody. But if you knew that beforehand, you could either pair with somebody else, or you could adapt somebody's approach. So I'm going to take my shaper hat off because I'm not going to get anywhere with that on. Let me play my coordinator role in this respect. So it's about aligning the right people at every part of the sales process.
That's fascinating, because often in a complex sale, and when you are working with large accounts, it is a multi-faceted sales approach. It's often many people on our side, and there's definitely a lot of people on that side. So we, of course, can do our own team profiles, but how would that work for the customer? We can't, I guess, ask them to do or could we? Could we ask them to do a...
Well, that was the challenge that Javier always used to say, why not?
Yeah.
Because you're there for a joint outcome.
I love that.
So why not ask your customers? Why not?
Yeah, because it's win-win.
You're both after... It is a win-win. Yeah. And it also shows the seriousness that you're taking the relationship. There's a longevity, there's an authenticity piece around that. We want this to work. We want everybody to get, like you say, a win-win situation. Why wouldn't you ask them? I
mean, that fits on really well with some of the podcasts we've done recently on negotiation, where we are talking about a win-win. But how do we get the win-win? It sometimes isn't as obvious as it may seem. So here's another approach. I really like that, I think it would have to be the right account. Like I think of some customers, it just wouldn't work completely.
No, me too. That was a bit idealistic, but people are using it. Or if you don't use it, you can get some clues. If people are always asking for the detail, they're probably high completer finisher. If somebody is not prepared to make a decision because they don't feel they've got all of the information, probably a high monitor evaluator.
Absolutely.
You can start seeing that. If somebody always starts a conversation with how a family, friends, and they've got lots of empathy, probably high team worker, you can then work out how best to use that information to get the best negotiated place that you can. Absolutely.
Fascinating. When I did the little intro at the start, one of the things which I took from your LinkedIn profile was you said that innovation is always in the line with the company ethos. So you're now in, you've been running the business for a long time, but you're now with the team owning it. Where do you see it going then? Where do you see the future for Belbin?
I'd say it's only just started for us. We've been around for such a long time, but teamwork, we've been talking about for years, and it's only over the last 2 or 3 years that it seems everybody's caught up and realised the importance of teams. I think COVID made us realise that we can be very effective individually, but actually the beauty and the magic comes when we understand how to work together more effectively. So what we're going to do is keep beating the drum that we need to celebrate this diversity. We need to start using this language, because high-performing teams are quite rare.
Sure.
Because they don't have the language and the skills and the understanding to become high-performing. If we can help those, that's where we want to be. And if you're looking at the future, it's very much global. We're in about 25 countries at the moment, but we're just talking to Korea at the moment and other countries, and it's all very, very exciting.
Fantastic. And I was going to ask about COVID, really, and how that would have impacted how people looked at teams.
Yeah.
Did that bring out it must have brought out some real take-homes in terms of the importance of teams.
Oh, it did. And it also brought some great take-homes about these lovely rectangles. We feel that we know people, but we kind of don't. And it's understanding how to manage each rectangle accordingly and everybody knowing where that contribution is. But one thing we did notice is that we carried out some research, and it was the fact that individual productivity may be up. Because we haven't got any distractions, basically.
True.
We're not travelling into work. There's so many positives of working by oneself. However, when you look at the team, your engagement with the team, the productivity, the creativity, that does go down. It did go down when we're all working from home. So it's finding that balance. But if you've got a language that you can talk about it, that's the thing of beauty.
Fascinating.
And that's what Belbin brings in.
Yeah. Joe, it's been fantastic catching up with you today and learning a lot more about Belbin. As I say, I was perhaps a very early adopter to it, really, but to really understand a lot more about the background. And I'm sure we could have carried on talking for the rest of today if my throat would hold up. Where's the best place for people to find out more?
Belbin.com. Belbin.com. It's very simple.
And
or find me on LinkedIn. More than happy.
I was going to say, I know you're on LinkedIn and quite active on LinkedIn as well. And if somebody wanted to say, okay, I want to find out my preferred team role, how would they go about doing it?
Everything can be accessed via our website.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. Anybody can go on and find out their Belbin team role profile.
And obviously there's a cost involved.
There is a cost. I think it's about £40.
Oh, wow, it's as low as that, yeah.
Absolutely.
Bargain. You heard it here first, folks.
Well, you said that. I didn't like to. There was a pause there. I was hoping you were going to put it. Thank you.
I think in terms of if I really, want to get the best out of my team, £40 per person, that seems like a really good...
It's a no-brainer, isn't it? But no, find out a bit more. Have a look on our website.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure people will. So, folks, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, then don't forget to subscribe using your favourite app and tell your friends and colleagues about us, of course. Also, if you use Apple or Spotify, we'd love you to leave us a review. And you can also contact the show if you want to ask us a question or just generally make any comment using our email address, which is just podcast@georgejames-training.com. I'll be back again in 2 weeks' time with my colleagues Jonathan and Prue for another discussion on some aspect of sales. In the meantime, happy selling, and I'll talk to you soon.